Joining me now to share his thoughts on what unfolded in Iraq over the past decade is retired U.S. Army General Paul Eaton. General Eaton commanded operations to train Iraqi troops during the early years of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He currently serves as senior advisor to the National Security Network, a progressive think tank that focuses on foreign policy and defense issues. General Eaton, welcome to The Heat. Thanks so much for joining us. Let me put it to you simply. Was the Iraq war necessary?
First, thank you very much for having me. And no, the Iraq War was not necessary. It was a strategic error of huge proportions. I regret it very much.
You know, it's interesting you bring up strategy, so I'll throw something at you and I want to get your thoughts. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." And I get the sense that that's pretty much how you would describe things, because I had a chance to talk to you before, and you said even when you got your orders, your wife even looked at them and said, hey, these should have come a lot earlier.
Absolutely. We failed miserably to work through the entire planning sequence. The civilian leadership did not allow the military to plan for the reconstruction phase, the post-combat phase, phase 4 as we call it. And I regret that our four-star generals did not insist upon it. So we had a serious failure at the four-star level in the United States military and in our civilian leadership.
If you were to detail what went wrong, and that's one aspect of it, I'm sure there are more, what would your laundry list look like?
Well, when we state, let's take it a given that we go into Iraq. We have decided that containment is not sufficient. We had the false information on weapons of mass destruction. All that considered, we go into Iraq. The primary failure was that we did not address the potential of an assumption failing. When you develop a plan, any military planner, you have assumptions. And for each assumption, you've got to have a contingency to address that assumption should it fail. The assumption was that Iraqi political infrastructure, that the governmental infrastructure would remain intact, that we would come in, be welcomed as saviors, rose petals on the streets, and that we would be out of there in a month or 2 months. That assumption obviously was a catastrophic failure, and we did not have a contingency plan. That phase 4 that I alluded to, that reconstruction phase, we did not have that plan in the box. We did not have the people, the men, the training, the equipment available to go in and rebuild the country that we just broke.
How is it possible that something like that could happen?
Well, the military knows better, and we were absolutely prohibited by Secretary Rumsfeld, and I assume his superiors, the Vice President, the President.
Peter, thank you very much.
Secretary Rumsfeld prohibited the Army, the CENTCOM commander, from doing the Phase 4 planning. And what we were left with was a 3rd Infantry Division and the Marine MEF ill-prepared to deal with the collapse of the Iraqi society.
There's also this disconnect on what happened on the ground there in Iraq with how it was viewed here in the United States by the people who live here. Why would you say that is the case, and how harmful is that long-term, would you say?
What we did not communicate to the United States was the true objectives, the true mission of going into Iraq. What the Bush administration wanted was a painless regime change. What the Bush administration, in fact, got was a failed state. Iraq was not a vital national interest on 18 March 2003. On 19 March, when we penetrated the border and absolutely blew through the Iraqi armed forces and collapsed the state, Iraq then became a vital national interest. that we were not prepared to treat as a vital national interest.
Your job was to work with the Iraqi security forces. How difficult was that task? What were some of the things that you had to overcome, and how would you describe them today?
The Iraqi people are a delightful people, a delightful society. They are well educated. The women were fairly emancipated. The women, if we consider Iraqi society about 85% literate, the women were perhaps 10 percentage points behind the men. So when we started developing the Iraqi army, we brought in a lot of veterans. We brought in, all the officers were former officers in Saddam's army. We found them very easy to work with from a training perspective, from a physical fitness perspective. The challenge was what the British call the moral component of soldier development, and that is getting the Iraqi soldier to believe that he is a legitimate actor for a legitimate government, and to display the initiative that we've grown to expect from Western armies. Now, from a U.S. perspective, the mission was considered very much an economy of force role, and we could never get my Pentagon chain of command focused to provide the necessary money in a timely fashion and the other resources we needed to develop the armed forces.
You know, you speak with some affection for the people of Iraq, and as you know, so many of them still displaced, thousands of civilians killed in this war, many would say needlessly. There's still sectarian violence, there's still suicide bombings going on. As you look back on this decade and you think of the Iraqis that you left behind when you came back here to the States, what are your thoughts?
I still communicate with men I met over in Iraq and worked with in Iraq, soldiers we trained, and in the long run, and you know, we're talking many years, but in the long run, I think this is going to be okay, because I have faith in a society that that is educated well enough to manage a transition in government. It's not going really well with Mr. al-Maliki. The Prime Minister is exercising some sectarian options that I think are ill-advised, but it's going to work out okay for the Iraqis in the long run. Let
me ask you this. Secretary of State Powell, of course, briefed the UN Security Council. We all remember those pictures, his presentation that day. Washington Post the next day said that it's hard to see how anyone can doubt that Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction. Obviously, that was not the case. We're hearing this drumbeat now about Iran. Do you think that the Western press and the Western citizenry should be a little bit more skeptical when these kind of statements are made by the government? Should we probe a little bit deeper?
Oh, dear God, yes. An attack on Iran will virtually assure that Iranians will go after a nuclear weapon. They've been at this from the Shah's times. The Iranians have been focused on a nuclear program. Whether or not they choose to weaponize this program is yet unknown. But if we attack them, I guarantee you, they will weaponize their nuclear program.
National security, let's ask about that. As you look back, is the United States more secure because of the war in Iraq? Is the West more secure or less secure?
We destabilized the region. From a Middle East, from a regional perspective, the attack into Iraq really screwed this thing up. Saddam was a natural force offset to Iran. That was a natural tension that kept Iran pinned down pretty well. When we removed Saddam and created a Shia-tending state that is closer to Iran than it is closer to us, than it's close to us, we destabilized the region and created a problem that did not need to be created.
So I guess the answer would be no.
I say no.
Yes. General, thank you so much for joining us. Certainly appreciate it.
Ever a pleasure, Michael. Thank you.